really cool. So we did a panel over at Prime, and you guys doubled them. I mean, it's cool to see this many people interested in case modding out here in East, and this is really super cool. I guess introductions here first. My name is Charlie Falcone, known as Gentleman Dingo or Dingo Modder on Facebook. I'm an amateur modder. I do get sponsored every now and then for various different projects. I have the pleasure of working with all these fine gentlemen. Right next to me, I have Richard Surroz, otherwise known as Darth Beavis. I can't think of anything he hasn't done in modding. He's really good at doing hardline tubing. He does some wonderful and amazingly beautiful water cooling pieces. The man does miracles with acrylic. Next to him, we have Travis Jank, and he is the resident expert for anything liquid nitrogen cool. The man is a serious overclocker and is likewise a awesome modder and a independent business owner. He runs his own shop in Idaho. Next to him, we got Mike Landenberger, who has the patience and fortitude to do amazing stuff with cabling. He is a professional sleever, and pretty much if you see something awesomely sleeved on the floor today, he's done it. And next to him, we've got Christian Nost, and he is a 3D modeler and prototyper for a company called Harbringer, which makes the really cool looking desk cases. And we're happy to be here. We're happy you guys are here. We love talking about this stuff. Let's just get a show of hands. How many of you people out there are modders? That's super cool. Okay. And how many of you guys are at least familiar with modding, know what it is? You guys all know what modding is. Okay. So, I mean, I could go over some of the basics and things like that, but basically, we make cases cool. And not just cases. We make controllers cool. We make laptops cool. We make surfaces cool. Anything. We like to take things apart, put things back together, and take your boring old piece of equipment and make it something that your friends are all ooh and ahhing about. Sometimes we don't do so great of a job, but it's a lesson learned, and we do it better the next time. And sometimes we break things, but we also know how to fix them too. So, case modding. Just some of the things that are easy and anybody can do. Before I got on the flight to come out to Boston today, I had about 2 hours notice. So if you get a chance, you come up here. I just did a little dremeling on the back of this surface and made this design. Still needs some cleaning up, probably a little touch of paint and things like that. But just with a nice little etching tip and some free time. It took me about an hour and a half. I tossed that on the back of the surface. I used a bit of a stencil, but when you put a sticker on it, you know, really the lines go crazy. You're just kind of ripping things through, but yeah. Other things you can do, painting. I mean, you can paint. You can paint anything, right? You can paint a canvas, you can paint a computer case, you can pick up an airbrush. A lot of times I end up using brushes. Personally, I also do miniature gaming, so I use miniature game paints a lot of times in some of my painting projects. Cutting, simple, easy cutting, making windows on the sides of cases, because everybody, you want to show off that nice video card you just spent $1,000 on. You know, so you got to have a window to show that off, so your friends not only see you toning them in the games, but they can see that card sitting there, and it's your computer boom. But let's go ahead and get things started off. We'll start with the very beginning of the process. So Christian, and he'll go ahead and talk about, you know, some of the things for designing and prototyping.
So again, I'm Christian. I went to school for industrial design, and a lot of people have been that word and that major has been popping up a lot. So there's actual big process that goes into designing cases, both for production and for modding. The modding scene is a lot different than doing stuff for production, but the process usually stays the same. You usually start out with some sketching, inspirational images. We do a lot of iterative stuff where you take the same design, just kind of move it one at a time, and you just kind of sort of you repeat the design over and over and over, and you make minor tweaks to it to a point that you could get a finished product. That one that I worked on, that was about 8 or 10 different designs before we actually got that one to where it's currently at. You'll see it through the photos. There's a couple of them. I have a wall-mounted server that I built, and that thing has went through, I don't know, 12 to 15 different designs, both in sketching and modeling. So after we have a sketch, and whatnot, we end up moving into research and development with it. And this includes like market research, material choices, stuff like that. Depending on if it's like a production model, if we're going to be like selling it, we look at what the market's looking for, what features are out there, what other companies are doing currently, what companies aren't doing, what people want, stuff like that. Then we move into stuff like CAD modeling, which is either visual or for production. Stuff like we have 2 versions of modeling that we do. I call them either look-see models or production models. The look-see models are just solid shapes to get the actual design to a point where you can get a really nice. That's one. That's a look-see model. It just looks good. It looks good to render it. You can show people it, but when it comes to actually making it, it's useless. And that's where the production one comes in. Those are usually tooled. I use a piece of software called SolidWorks to use a lot of this. There are a lot of tools built into that allow for sheet metal bending and whatnot, and that you send to manufacturers and whatnot. Yeah. So after that, we end up getting prototypes of the actual design, and we actually got the dopamine one that we saw up there. I just got the prototype in there at home and started working on it. We actually found out, well, there's a couple things we need to change. So first go around on a lot of these things is, all right, we had the idea. A lot of it's solid, but there's still a couple things that need to change. So then we go into refinement, we make those changes. Then we usually have another, either if it's a whole thing needs to be redone, then sometimes you bite the bullet because those prototypes are running around $3,000 to $5,000 a pop. So if it's like a couple pieces on the dopamine that need to be changed, you can just have that piece remade, which obviously brings the cost down. And this is again for production stuff. So once you have those refinements finished, people look at it, they kind of give you your feedback, and if there's any last minute tweaks that need to be done, we make those changes and move on to then we start releasing and selling. Now, when it comes to actual modding, the modding process is similar. The only difference is that the way I do it is I actually look at what hardware I want to put into a system, and I don't know if you can pull up the image of the server. Well, to give you an idea, is that so I sit down and I kind of think about what exactly I want to be in a system before I start actually designing it. Yeah, that's it. So that's just a wall-mounted server. It's got it only has 2 hard drives and a mini ITX motherboard on it. And I specifically designed it that way because I wanted just something that had a lot of storage. It's got 6 terabytes and low-grade i3 processor. And I just kept it real simple. But this is what I would consider functional art, and this isn't something you can sell to people, or you can. It's just cost not going to like. But the idea with those is you want them to be, like stuff that like Richard does. Those are also functional art pieces because you wouldn't ever see them on like at Best Buy or Newegg or wherever you buy your hardware from. Who buys from Best Buy? But so that's sort of the process that I go through because it's a lot very similar kind of styles, but it's the pieces of it are different enough that they yeah.
Thanks, Christian.
Okay, Christian. So we'd like to provide a little bit of context so things will kind of make sense as we go along, as the other panel members speak. How many of you have heard of a company called Red Harbinger? Okay, well you're about to. So we'll bring up the desk. Myself, Travis, and Christian are all also part of Red Harbinger. So we make the most insane computer case that is available for retail. So, right there. Do you see that, puppy? So this, you can build, this desk, you can build 2 systems in. So well, I'll tell you a little bit more about one of the recent projects we did. But you can put 2 systems in there, completely water-cooled. You don't have to have a computer case on your desk. So that was Red Harbinger's first product. And Christian is a designer, so the dopamine case, he'll tell you a little bit more about what the purpose of it is, because it's kind of cool and a little bit different. How many people here have heard of a Bitcoin mining? Okay, so cryptocurrencies. Travis will actually speak more about that from a technical perspective, but maybe Christian can tell us a little bit more about why we designed a dopamine case and what its target market is.
Well, the dopamine was, it was originally aimed at Bitcoin miners. It actually has slots for 6 GPUs because we've noticed that some motherboard manufacturers and the way people actually connect the GPUs to the motherboard, they use the standoff ribbon cables. So, and since they're only doing essentially scripts and they're running numbers, you can use anything from PCIe 16x and down to 1x with these ribbon cables, and they'll actually work. So we have spots for 6 cards in there. Any size motherboard, I think we went up to EATX at some point with that. 2 power supplies in the bottom, and I think 2 SSD/hard drive mounts. Now again, this was built around Bitcoin miners, but we found that, unfortunately for the price, a lot of them were kind of turned off by that. So we actually found that gamers would be interested in this test bench because a lot of these people who run comparative numbers between each cards just want to take them in and out real quick. So this kind of provides that easy access. It's open air, and some people I don't see many open air cases on the market anymore. I miss them. But we just wanted it to be simple, sleek, easy to build, because most likely this is going to come in pieces to people. So it's fairly simple to put together, and and sturdy. That was usually the big ones that we wanted with it, because it's a lot of hardware, and obviously when you have 6 $500 graphics cards on there, I don't think you want that falling over. I mean, anything else?
No. I think that's great.
Okay.
All right, Mike, you want to hit him with some sleep?
Yeah, I'm not. No.
No.
How many of you build your own computers? Yes. Yeah, I figured that one would be an easy one. How many of you have spent hours hiding your cables? Yes. All right. So cable sleeving is basically the opposite of that. It's basically taking a part of your case, and those are actually, and I'll get into the different types here, but as test fabric and plastic type of sleeving. And that is actually, I don't sell that. It was just really cool, so I made it and took a photo of it. But basically, it's taking something that we normally hide in our case, and we're making a work of art out of it. We're matching the colors, we're making sure that you have good cable management, and I think that we have a photo up there. See more artsy photos. No, this is a bunch of artsy photos, I guess. Oh, we don't even have one inside the case. That's my fault. Anyway, but basically, making your fine details and then making those pop. Basically, sleeving's been around for quite a while now. The history of sleeving, there's about 20 different people that think that they brought it up and that they first, that was their great idea, but I'm not going to argue with any of those people about who actually came up with sleeving. But it started out when, some of these guys were first doing their own building and water cooling, actually taking radiators out of cars and then putting them inside of a computer. Have you guys seen the bunch sleeving that most power supplies come with now? They have, they're all bunched up. That was actually the first iteration of sleeving. It first came about. A lot of it was using, really bright colors, and it looked, people throwing in as many cold cathodes and lights and everything inside of the case that they possibly could cram in there. And they did the same thing with the cable management. They would not only hide it, but then they would bunch sleeve it as well. Well, after a while, people had a great idea, and let's do individual sleeving. Every one of those wires has its own individual PET, plastic type sleeving on there. And basically, people started color coding. How many of you guys have built a computer with your own color theme when you first started? Okay. Kind of? Maybe a little bit?
Well, I guess whatever we get, whatever accessories like case banners, you know,
Yeah.
I try to like
Color
get it
coding.
to match the color of the other case lights,
Mm-hmm.
just to have a consistent look.
Yeah, absolutely. And basically, this is the, putting the final touches on a system. You're trying to match everything that you can perfectly. Us as case modders, or the 5 of you that raised your hand out there, that also do case modding. It's, how do I say this? I think I said fine details. Like anyway.
It's little minor stuff that
Minor stuff, yeah. It's the minor details that really make or break a mod. When you're doing hardline, and Richard will get into this, when you're doing hardline water cooling, like this fellow said here, when you're actually matching the colors of the fans and everything, this just brings it up one more notch. The different methods of sleeving out there, you have OEM sleeving, which is basically rewiring up a whole power supply. You're making your own pinout on it. Typically, you want to use 18 or 16 gauge wire. Most people don't know this, but typically 18 gauge will be more than enough for most of your power supplies, unless you're doing heavy overclocking. And even then, it can still handle most of it, as long as you're not, going crazy and doing what Travis here does. And then there's extensions, which a lot of the photos that you actually saw up there, the ones that have the nice rainbow curve, those are simply extensions. You're doing the first part that I just talked about by hiding all of your wires the best you can, and then you put the extension on the end of it. And so the part that you do see is, the awesome, lovely colors that you get to see up there. Now, the types of sleeving, when sleeving first came about, like I said, when they were doing the bunch sleeving, it was actually by a company called TechFlex, and they have tons and tons of PET is actually their brand name, but PET is actually a type of sleeving as well. And it's exactly the same sleeving that you see on the bunch ones. And, you can really see through it. It's really porous, I guess you could call it. And then there's sleeving like this. This is still PET or plastic type, but it's a very, very, very dense weave. Some of the things that and that's paracord right there. Paracord is a nylon material, and it's just not for parachuting either. So you can use it on here really easy. The nylon's really hard to use. The PET plastic is really, really easy to use. And then there's that cross in between that I showed you as the first photo that was up there. It has both fabric and plastic. And that stuff is extremely hard to use. There's 3 things that I always try to tell people. I do lots of guides on YouTube, and they're incredibly long and boring, so you don't have to watch them if you don't want to. But I really go down in depth on how to actually produce this. It takes a lot of patience, knowledge, and you need to have the right tools. When you're doing cable sleeving, there's an actual set of tools that's specific for that. Like I said about the OEM sleeving, when you're making your own wires, you got to crimp them, you got to form them, and if you don't have the right tools for that, then it gets incredibly, incredibly hard. I know some people, when sleeving first started out, they didn't even have a crimper. They were actually taking a needle nose plier, and if you've ever seen the Molex crimps, which are the little crimps on there, and they were individually trying to take a needle nose and putting them together. So I'd have to say the people that first started out on sleeving, they were very hardcore people. I mean, it's all attention to detail, and then putting in 5,000 lights in your case too. I hope I'm not offending anybody that does that. If you do, it's cool. But tools, patience, and knowledge. more so nowadays, I've really seen cable sleeving start to become an industry standard. There's lots of power supplies that actually come individually sleeved nowadays too. And most of that stuff is, I want to say most of it's PET. There is a couple other brands that use a nylon type paracord. But more people, when you're actually spending this much time and you're going to spend the money to do it, and cable sleeving is kind of an expensive hobby. Like I said, you have to buy all the tools. They're very specialized for what they do. But when you're just buying extensions, Phoenix actually makes extensions, and that's made out of paracord too. But you're going to be wanting to spend, a lot of time with it. You're going to be really getting down in there. Like if you go to one of the extensions, that actually, when I first started out sleeving, one extension probably took me about 5 hours just to sit down and make it. And the more that you do it, as well as anything, you start practicing, you get really, really good at it, and then you really start to get an eye for detail. And then you can get a perfect curve like that, which is simply, if you guys want to know, it's just making the under wires just shorter than the top. And it's very simple. You guys can check out all my guides on YouTube /Luther Customs. I want to talk just a quick moment about coloring. When you have a system, there's 3 different ways I kind of look at coloring and color theory. One is just you have one color. So you have, let's say, a red motherboard, red case fans, and red everything else. The second one is using a dual color scheme. And typically, the best way to settle it up the best that you can is you're going to want to have one color that's your prominent color, and then you're going to want to have another color that's your accent color. So let's say you have that same red case, and then you start to add white accents. So instead of making everything even, which would start to clash with your eyes, you take the white and you make accent colors out of it. So let's say you have white case fans and then everything else is red. Now, one of the best ones, and this is just my own opinion, is a 3-color scheme, where you have a mid-color, you have an accent color, and then you have your base color. And that's why you see a lot of my sleeving, it actually has 3 different colors. Your base is going to be, normally it's what your case is, normally it's starting out with black or white cases, those are probably the most popular. And then you're going to have your mid-color, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's going to be the color that you have about the medium amount in your case, and then topping it off with the accent. And I find if you have that triple color scheme, and they'll actually show you guys some mods here in a little bit, and you guys can just in the back of your head be looking at it and trying to pick out which color is which. But you'll really see that if you apply sleeving into one of those mods, and then you really follow a good color theory, then it just, everything flows. And instead of your eye being bouncing everywhere when you look at a mod, it's going to be drawn to the parts that you're going to want it to be drawn to. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I mean, I could go on for like an hour and you guys are like, no, shut up. It's just, sleeving in itself is its own art form. When we talk about modding as a whole, there's all these different little facets. Everybody has their own, their own skill set. Like I do sleeving, he does hardline tubing, he's overclocking, I don't know what Charles does. And he does designing. And there's a whole bunch of other little communities that go into modding as a whole. So when you kind of get into it, isn't just, I'm a modder, you're a modder, but you specialize in this. Or, you specialize in this, but your main hobby is modding. So that's all I got.
Answer the questions. Fabricating, sir.
Okay.
All right, Travis.
All right, so my name's Travis Jank. Online, you may know me as V2 or V2V3. Been overclocking for well over a decade now, and my specialty is extreme overclocking. So The extreme end of overclocking, I use liquid nitrogen to super cool computers. Give me a show of hands here. Who's heard of overclocking? Wow. That's probably the most impressive number of hands I've ever seen in a crowd for overclocking. Usually people say, what is that? Does it deal with clocks and time and things like that? You make it run faster? Yes, not the wall clock, the computer clock. So another show of hands, how many people have actually attempted to overclock, tried to overclock, or maybe successfully overclocked? All right, so also a good number of hands there. I like to see that. Basically, what overclocking is trying to achieve the ultimate in performance for a computer. And the way that you do that is by increasing the speed of the processor, by pushing it farther than what the manufacturer intended it. So it's kind of like the quarter-mile race. You want to go and buy the fastest car on the market. If you have the money for it, let's say it does 9 seconds, and that's pretty impressive. But it's not fast enough for you, so you can't really go out there and buy a faster car. So you got to rip into it, put a turbo on it, maybe NOS it or something like that, put new tires on it, beef it up quite a bit, and you can get some faster laps out of that vehicle. Overclocking is basically the same thing. You can go out there and buy the fastest computer in the world, whatever is currently available. There's always new technology coming out, but you can make it even faster. So the principle behind overclocking is the fact that heat is the limiting factor. If the computer runs too hot, it's going to shut down, get damaged, something's going to fail. So the manufacturers really test their product to say, okay, this is going to work in Antarctica, and it's also going to work in the middle of the desert. And because the manufacturers go through and really put a lot of time and effort in designing their product, we have what we call headroom. And with that headroom, it means, okay, let's say I go out and I buy a 3 gigahertz processor because all I can afford is $200 for my gaming PC. And it's not fast enough. A new game came out, let's say it's Titanfall, and it just really doesn't make the cut, I'm going to have to go out and buy either a new computer or a faster processor, and I really just spent all my money on this video game. So you might actually look at your computer and see if it has overclocking functions. Today, manufacturers include software that you run within Windows. It's a program. It's very easy to use. Most motherboards on the market, especially enthusiast or gamer motherboards, come with overclocking features in the BIOS. From there, you could take that 3 gigahertz processor that doesn't make the cut for your game and increase the performance. Just the original cooler that comes with it, you might be able to get something like 4 gigahertz out of it, and that could be what you're looking for to be able to play your video game. Gamers are all about frame rates. Way back in the day when I was gaming, that's really what it came down to. Our really big, nice CRT monitor with a high refresh rate, and we were trying to get like 20, 30 frames per second. I guess I'll get into a little background of why I got into overclocking. I love gaming. It was everything in my life. Me and my brother spent every ounce of time and effort playing video games and trying to see who was better. Because he was older, he got the new computer first, and I got the old one once he tore all the good parts out of it. So when we tried playing video games, he always had the higher frame rates, he always had the higher score, and I would complain about lag. So I tried to figure out, without having any money, because I was too young to have a job, and my parents thought computers were a fad, I tried to research, okay, how do I make this computer faster? What can I do here? And I found out that I could push the speed of the processor. So I started to, and then it would crash. And I just thought, whoa, what just happened here? I have no idea. And so it kind of like spurred into this like computer repair technician type thing where I broke a computer. Now I'm really worried. I'm sweating. I got to fix it before my parents find out, and I don't want my brother to know, of course. So I found out it was because it got too hot. And I said, oh, well, then that's simple. I'll just put like a big box fan on it. And so as time progressed, I borrowed fans and things like that and strapped them to the computer and got a little bit faster out of it. And then one day on Halloween, I saw this dry ice, and people told me, oh, don't touch it. It's so cold it will burn you. I just figured, okay, why don't I just take that and put it on the computer? I got a block of dry ice. I went home, and my limiting factor at this time was a video card. And so I literally set it on the back of the video card. I was like, oh man, this is so awesome. But it didn't make the computer any faster just because it was running colder. So then I had to figure out, okay, now you can actually overclock a video card, because this is the same thing as your processor. They both have these frequencies that they operate at, so how many times per second they're doing something. And I just wanted to do it faster. So I found ways to overclock the video card, and it was really great because all of a sudden I had the highest frame rates. I was like, this is so cool, but how do I compare it to my brother and say it's better, And that's where I found software called a benchmark program. And what that does is it stresses the computer and it gives you a score at the end. So it's a number that you can use to compare the performance of any computer in the world that runs the same piece of software. So it's like, aha, you know, my computer's faster than yours. That was very short-lived because once the dry ice had evaporated away, all this ice turned into water and the computer shorted. So my magic smoke leaked out of the computer. And that was kind of a big upset for me. And that started this battle into, okay, I achieved the ultimate performance. I was so excited about that, but it's not something that's practical for everyday application. So I went to Home Depot, bought things like liquid electrical tape, and poured it all over the computer parts, and that protected it from water. So I achieved a moisture barrier. And in a lot of pictures you see with the overclocking here, because I'm using liquid nitrogen, which is 320 degrees below zero, it's going to freeze the water right out of the air. It's going to make a lot of ice. And if any of that melts, I'm going to have an electrical problem. So we go through, we coat the computer with different like dielectric grease or clear coats or something like that to basically prevent water from actually coming in contact with the computer. And it still didn't really solve the practical thing that was going on, which was I can't really go to the store every day and buy a block of dry ice and stick it on my computer and do this whole process. And so I decided that a more permanent solution was needed. And the way I did that was when my parents went on vacation, I asked if I could borrow their freezer-fridge combo. They had no idea why I wanted to do it. I really didn't want to tell them. So that weekend I took a hacksaw and cut the fridge in half. And I put my computer inside of it. That definitely solved the practical application of not having to, you know, re-cool it all the time. It stayed nice and cool inside the freezer until the parents came home and wondered what just happened. So I had to convince them that it was, you know, it was well worth the sacrifice.
For science.
For science, exactly. Yeah. And that started basically my education. I ended up wanting to make it cooler, wanting to make it faster. So I went to college for refrigeration technology. And the only reason I did that was because I actually had to have a license to buy some of these refrigerants and chemicals. And then even to use liquid nitrogen, you have to have a permit for it. So that allowed me to start building refrigeration units, or phase change units, if you've heard of those. And so I started building those, mainly to cool the processor, started using it to cool the video card. Eventually got to the point where I like to go to LAN parties and take my behemoth of a computer with me. So I started cutting out like the chassis for a computer and integrate a cooling system into it. And I put a refrigerator in my computer, and I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And so I ended up going to a LAN party. It was actually PDX LAN way back in the day, probably like 2004, 2005. And I had this really awesome, fast computer, and people were just like, dude, what is wrong with you? It takes like 3 people to carry that thing in. It takes desk. It's loud, it looks ugly, there's wires everywhere, electrical tape all over the place. And that's where I met Darth Beavis. And I'm like, what are you talking about? My computer's so fast. And he says, well, you gotta come see mine. And he's got this Alienware computer. I'm like, oh, you're one of those guys, right? A very beautiful Alienware computer. Actually, it was custom airbrush. It looked like a stormtrooper. And I was like, oh man, this guy has to know about overclocking. So how fast is it? And it's running at stock speed. So that's when I said, well, look how fast mine is. And we basically got into this argument. And it's kind of what brought us all together here. I was like, you know, I'm all about performance. I want this thing to run as fast as possible. You know, I want the world record. I want that champion title. I want to say my computer's faster than everyone's. And he said, well, it looks like crap. I didn't quite understand the importance of what he was conveying to me. He definitely had the looks down, and I had the performance. And that really started a relationship there where we said, okay, I'll help you with performance if you help me with looks. And that's when the next time I see him, he's got a custom-built refrigeration unit in his computer, custom airbrushed, and he's got an axe sticking out of the top of it. That was kind of when I realized we had something going on here. And you know, by combining all of our skills together, we could all basically work together with a common goal and create an awesome and amazing product. And it's something that we kind of latched on to each other and been pushing forward ever since. And Red Harbinger is a perfect example of that. You know, without Christian, we wouldn't actually have a product that we could build and provide to the customers. You know, without Richard, you wouldn't even take a second look at it. You'd say, what is that rat's nest? You know, I don't want that. It doesn't look like it'd be reliable. I don't want to, you know, have to hire a forklift to bring it in the house. So it really is something unique to finally stand here in front of you guys and and have pictures of, you know, not just a prototype, but, you know, a working example, something you can go out and buy, like the cross desk. You know, it's a thing of beauty. It gives me enough space as an overclocker to be able to pack as much computer into one place. It gives enough room for the case modders and the sleevers to be able to tweak and adjust the aesthetics of the computer to sleeve the cables, to run hard acrylic tubing, and actually make something that is appealing to a broader audience, because most people look at what I do, they don't understand it, and they walk away. But a lot more people will see something like a fully built cross desk and say, wow, I'd like to have that in my bedroom. So I will leave you with that.
Actually, I forgot to mention it when I was talking before. So every one of these panels, all the panelists, we get together and we build a case mod, or we custom build a scratch build case for charity. Last year, the PAX Prime people, we all put together, we had Lee Harrington donate the case. Darth here, he worked on the cooling. I did a lot of the sourcing stuff. Bob Stewart did some of the masking and painting. We had everybody, you know, like of course it's sleeving. And we ended up putting the case up for auction on Desert Bus for Hope. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. Yeah, the case ended up raising $16,682, all to charity. This year, we're going to go ahead and put together another case, and I'll actually let Richard here talk a little about that, and also from his aspect of things.
Okay, well, I'll talk about the case we're going to use. How many people like StarCraft here? How many people have heard of Husky StarCraft, the caster? So if you go on his YouTube channel, you'll see that we did a little video came out and recorded it, where we built the system for him after, I think it was 2 PAX Primes ago. So he came down to my house, and over a one-day period, we did a complete, awesome Protoss themed build. And so he's upgraded to another system, so I have that back, and we're going to use the chassis from that. Now, again, it's a beautiful all acrylic chassis themed with Protoss, and that will be one of the build outs that we'll use. So it has kind of like, you know, a special backstory, and hopefully we'll get some StarCraft fans who will bid on it. So I'm looking forward to that project. So, you know, Travis talked about, you know, the performance part, and obviously, you know, I'm really big on aesthetics, but we've reached a point in modding where there's really a huge, massive convergence. So, how many of you have used liquid cooling before? So you probably know that liquid cooling has gone through a huge evolutionary process back when you used heated cores out of cars and you milled your own blocks. Now you have several manufacturers making just amazing, amazing products in every color of the rainbow, just like Skittles. So you can mix and match and come up with anything that you want. While we have these products out, we like to still try to do cutting edge things. So did any of you see when Duke Nukem came out, I did a project for a gearbox. It's big, huge acrylic, like multiple pods, but we did some cutting edge water cooling. Some didn't work so well in there. You know, some things were experimenting with acrylic, but some things did work well. Pretty amazing system. So if you go do a YouTube search for Duke Nukem and NVIDIA, you'll see that video out at the Duke Nukem launch event.
I still have that case in my office.
Okay, can you stand up for a minute? I would like to introduce you. This is Randy Pitchford, CEO of Gearbox. So to give you a little background, NVIDIA wanted something that was just the most insane thing that would be worthy of Duke Nukem. And so we decided to take the atomic logo, and we made 3 pods, and wow, that was the most massive project I ever worked on. That was blood, sweat, and tears, I'll tell you. And yeah, just to ship it out there, that it was like a double coffin-sized case just to get it out to Gearbox. So, but I mean, it's awesome having game developers, especially awesome people like you who will believe in you, and will just they'll give a modder a chance, to do something really creative. So, and that was an awesome opportunity. So thank you again. So. And we've been doing a lot of other really cool projects. So how many people here have heard of Vanilla Ice? Okay, so Vanilla Ice, he for the last 18 years, after the peak of his music career, he started remodeling houses and flipping them. Not just houses, but mansions. And so we were brought out there with Red Harbinger to originally just do like a really nice cross desk for him for his ultimate gaming room. And we did a really good build. So we did some of the cutting edge, like heat bending acrylic tubing. So most of you have done the water cooling, you use flexible tubing, right? And that's nice, they have nice colors and everything. Well, what we do now, this is really cutting edge, we'll take hard acrylic tubing and we will heat bend it to the exact shape that you want. So you can do right angles in your loops. You don't have to use 90-degree fittings. It's just absolutely amazing. And in fact, one of the downsides is the acrylic tubing is kind of a little fragile, so you wouldn't want to ship a system. We have a new product that we're using called PETG, where you can hit that puppy with a hammer and it will not shatter. So it's like the ultimate water cooling setup. So we did some really cutting edge things when we were out there, but once you actually get to meet Vanilla Ice in person, you can't do anything small, and you have to go absolutely insane. So he had an attic space in this gaming room that wasn't being used, so he made what he called the leprechaun room. So someone who's vertically challenged like me, I can stand up in there. But Randy, you'd be bending over. You would not like it. But they wanted to do something really cool, so I can't show you pictures because the show will air on April 26th. And their lawyers have said, hey, you better not show anything until we air it. So watch on DIY Network April 26th, Vanilla Ice Project, and you'll see all these things that I'm talking about. Well, and this goes along with this cutting edge cooling and evolution. So we wanted to do something insane. So we bought a fish tank, a wall mounted fish tank, and we installed two small mini ITX systems in there, each with a 780. Now the problem, and modders, you know how this is, or you people who build, you come across a problem, and you'll solve it. You listen to the DJ while he revolves it, right? So what we did is there was not enough room to fit power supplies in this aquarium, so we had to cut the power supplies almost in half to get them to fit in there. For the video cards, of course, you can't have a video card mount perpendicular to the motherboard because of the space issues. So we use what are called PCI risers, like you use in Bitcoin mining rigs, to have everything parallel, so it's a bit nice and flat. Now, everything I do is water cooled, so we mounted radiators and pumps on the outside of the aquarium and then ran with the hard tubing to the outside of the aquarium. But we had to go a little bit on the crazy side. So we filled this aquarium with the computers in there with mineral oil. And we added bubblers. So it looks like it's an operational fish tank. So you'll have to check this out. Like I said, you always want to push and do crazy, crazy things, and you'll see a common theme because it goes along with water cooling, with the overclocking, with the wire management. And I can give you like a little more history on the wire management. How many people have been building computers since like 2000, 2005? Do you remember before we even had the round cables, what did we use? The flat IDE cables. So you basically had to do origami to get any type of cable management. So, I mean, it's been awesome to see the progression. One of the things I really like is that people like you and me, the manufacturers listen to us. And actually the case manufacturers look at what we're doing, and they learn from us, and they bring these products to market. This is one of the rigs where I did the acrylic hardline tubing. This is a case called Queen of Blades, so it's airbrushed with the Queen of Blades on the front. I think I had this here last year at PAX East, but I had flexible tubing in it at the time. This project was a nightmare. I had to ship it from Oregon to here, and it's a Case Labs case, which is not much shorter than I am. Awesome resource for case modding, water cooling tutorials. How many of you have read CPU Magazine before? Okay, so actually I recommend you actually even go look through archives. So last year we had a complete series that CPU Magazine wrote with the help of professional modders on all aspects of modding tutorials. So and every month they have another high-end mod that they've selected from a LAN party or maybe from a mailer sending it in. CPU Magazine is near and dear to my heart because they're the people who made it so I could become a professional case modder back in like 2007 when I got my first CPU Magazine cover. So they've been there every step of the way. There's a handful of people I can point out. CPU Magazine, my best friend Travis, Phil Schultz from NVIDIA who just passed away. There's a handful of people that made me, and so I just want to recognize you if you could stand up. And they do a lot for the modding community.
When I started doing modding, it was actually at the 3rd PAX over in Bellevue. I entered into a case mod contest, and CPU Magazine was judging it, and one of their primary judges was Beavis. And he was like, so where are you storing all of your work and things like that? I'm like, wait, what? People do that? He goes, yeah, go to VidTech. You'll see lots of these things. And he gave me 4th place. I forgive him, but I did learn a lot after that, checking out those additional resources. So yeah, if you guys like, line up and we'll start the questions and answers. Or we can just talk some more if you guys want. Yeah, either one of the microphones. We'll start with that one first. Yep.
The guy in the middle, sorry, I forgot your name.
Travis.
Travis, can you tell me a little bit about delitting? Are you familiar with that at all?
Oh yeah, that's actually a great question. So delitting is something that I had done back in about 2006, trying to achieve a world record, about 8.67 gigahertz for a processor. What I recognized was the lid on top of the processor, that metal cap that you see, is really there to protect the fragile piece of glass underneath. And that piece of glass is made out of silicon, that is the processor itself. More importantly, today, delitting has become ever popular with standard overclocking. And the reason why that is because there's thermal paste that goes between the processor and the lid that protects the processor. The inefficiencies of transferring heat make it so that when you're running that processor and you're pushing its performance, it starts to overheat at some point. And whenever you're overclocking, heat is your #1 enemy. So delitting is essentially removing the metal lid off the top of the processor, and that allows you to get better cooling because you're coming closer to the heat source, which is the processor itself. So it runs cooler, you can give it more power, you can make it run faster. What guys are doing right now, from a safety standpoint, is removing the lid of the processor, replacing the thermal paste on the inside with something of a better quality, something that transfers heat much faster and much more efficiently. They'll put the lid back on, and when you put the lid back on, it keeps the processor safe. However, if you do want the absolute most extreme cooling, I did see a manufacturer that's releasing a kit that when you take the lid off the processor, it'll protect it and allow you to put the cooler directly back on the processor.
Thank you.
Right before we go into the next question, if you look up on the screen, this is a case that, I guess you? Yeah, go ahead and stand up, man. You did a really cool case. We brought this down to the BYOC so you can actually see a cool case. Obviously, this is a scratch built one. I don't know. There might be a case inside of the case.
No.
No, total scratch built?
Total scratch.
Awesome. Go ahead.
So I've been building computers for a long time, several computers, but I'm using stock parts all the time, and I want to build a custom case. I have a friend that's a professional welder, I have access to materials, I have concepts, designs, I have all the internal guts. I don't really know where to go from there.
Like this? So, yeah, I live in Seattle, and I think we're pretty much across. Travis lives in Idaho. You live in Salem, North Dakota, and PA. That's right, Pennsylvania. Every single one of those places have metal shops and maker labs. I mean, you can go to places that'll help you with, welding. I actually go to a place called Hazard Factory. Sorry. And the guy that was on Webinizers actually runs that. And he teaches welding and how to do it, and also lets you rent equipment, or if you take one of his classes, you can do your own metal project there. So, you know, do your homework first, design it out first, so you know exactly what you're going to do, and look up for welding classes in your area. If you want to do aluminum, I highly suggest like TIG welding. MIG welding aluminum is really, really hard, but it's completely doable. Actually, one of the cases I did, this was for thermal take. The entire thing's fabricated. So I've done the metal aluminum. The frame itself is aluminum welded frame.
Thanks.
Yeah, and there's some cool things you can use, like the extruded aluminum as well. So it's almost you know, like an erector set. You know, so it's very, very, very flexible.
Absolutely.
I was just wondering, what was the biggest mistake you learned the most from?
Can we just go down the line with this one?
Yeah.
I'll have to answer. Well, probably on the server that I did, I had to be really careful with the metal backplate that it had. I actually had 2 of them made because when the guy who I was having him build it for me, fabricator, I had one of the motherboard pins out of line, and so I get the thing. It has like a $1,000 piece of aluminum, and the hole's out of line and showing the motherboard. So the whole thing was completely scrapped, and that was probably the most expensive, So you double check your motherboard position, hole positions. And you have to actually specify, tell them, make sure to put this pin, the one pin's on shorter on the other, on one side, didn't make a full square, and it's like an off square. I don't know how to describe it. It was off, and things happened. Bad things.
I think mine would have to be never plug in a power supply that you are holding with your hand inside of the power supply. It's not easy to let go.
So I guess the biggest learning mistake that I came across is early on when I was building refrigeration systems, I was pushing the limits. A common theme of mine is always saying, okay, I can do better, let's get more extreme. And sometimes that means more dangerous. So I bought some exotic refrigerants, and they seem to be very promising. I did not recognize that they were flammable. I had a leak in the middle of working on it, and it resulted in me being engulfed in about a 2-foot fireball and running and screaming. So for the next couple of weeks, I had to nurse a few burns, and I realized to do a lot more research when hazards like that are involved.
Yeah, so mine, obviously I told you before, when you're doing work for companies, you want to be a little more conservative, but this is kind of more of a personal issue. So all of us who have, since we're all guys up here, girlfriends or wives, you kind of have to make sure that you stay on their good side when you're doing this so they tolerate you. This one, the one that you're looking at up here is called Autopsy. And so this was like a medical mannequin, or a mannequin that had computer parts analogous to human body parts. So when I first built it, I had the filling tube in between his teeth sticking out, and I had 3 pumps in there, filled it with a blood red coolant. We just moved into a nice, beautiful new house, and I fired that up, and I didn't take precautions and plug them out, and blood red coolant went all over the wall. It looked like a scene from American Psycho or Dexter. So, try to always don't rush things, take precautions, follow your plans. When you're doing liquid cooling, do a 24-hour leak test. That kind of bit us in the rear end on the Vanilla Ice project. We had to redo some things, so just take your time.
For me, it was one of my learning. I think this was for the 4th PAX. I decided I wanted to do a clockwork case, try to do something sort of steampunky, and all of those are working clockwork parts. And when I got it, it had the wind-up springs. So I'm sitting there, I'm all excited, I'm cutting it with a Dremel, and I'm trying to get the spring off, and I cut it, and it goes, slices right through my leg, my pants, and I'm like, ooh, ooh. So, do your research on the things you're working with too, because the doctor told me, you know, that could have been a lot worse. You could have cut through an artery. It sliced through some muscle. It was a couple of stitches, and of course I had to post all my pictures up on BitTech so everybody can see. Ooh, and that's the other thing we like doing. We like posting our mistakes as much as our successes. So you'll see, you know, gruesome. This is what I did to my finger. This is what I did to my arm. But all right, Bob, I love that outfit, man. That is awesome.
Thank you. I see like a lot of the modders are, you know, it's all about the art, how good it looks, along with the achievement and the processing power that you get out of it. What is the forefront of sort of black box computer technology look like? You know, like something that can survive a 30,000-foot drop. That sort of, you know, is there like motions towards making everything inside wireless and then contain in mineral oil with its own like cooling system on the outside, and I can kick it and throw it at my toddler, that sort of thing?
So probably the closest thing I can come to that is in working with liquid nitrogen. It's not one of the easiest things to transport. I know with case modding, these guys have a heck of a time building a project and getting it from location A to B and having it in one piece. So what I did was I actually encapsulated the entire system in what we call dragon skin. And it's basically a silicon replication of human skin. And it mimics a great moisture barrier, and it can actually be removed from the system components. And I encapsulated the entire system to the point where I could ship it and FedEx couldn't break it. That in itself is kind of a feat to achieve. But it wasn't any single goal of dropping it out of an airplane. However, it was the most durable piece of equipment I've ever manufactured. And as far as an overclocking system, it still works and operates even till today. So that would be drop-proof, shock-proof, waterproof. If you were to put it in a metal box, you know, and seal it up, there's nothing to say it wouldn't work.
There's other also really cool projects out there along those exact same lines. Along with the case modding and maker stuff, NASA is actually looking for people to do modding. They have a project called AMSAT. So they want more satellites out there to track asteroids and things like that. And they've been going to a lot of the maker communities, and I told them they need to start going to some of the modder communities as well about developing little computers the size of basketballs that can be launched and let go into space. The idea is that you need it really cheap and be able to take a little rough treatment, or cheap enough that if it gets the rough treatment and gets destroyed, they don't care. They'll just send up another one. So AMSAT is kind of one of those projects that if you want to do something like that, you can be part of NASA.
Sweet.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why this is possible is that, I mean, granted, we all love desktop systems, big, beefy, you know, NVIDIA just announced they're going to be working on 8-way SLI, but the future of computing is really going smaller and smaller and smaller. So if you think about the phones you have in your pocket, they're quad-core processors, you know. The NVIDIA just announced their K1 processor, which is absolutely insane, and they need these smaller things so they could embed them in cars and have them be self-driving and have other types of functionality. So you're going to see that, you know, increasing as we go. So, you know, Moore's law, you know, things keep getting smaller, transistor counts keep increasing, and that will make it so, you know, this is actually possible. You know, along with solid-state drives that don't have moving parts. It's a whole evolution.
Thank you.
All right, so I think we got time for one more question, and then we have to kind of wrap it up.
Okay.
Okay.
You sure?
Okay, you sure? Okay.
You can take it if you want.
Both ask at the same time. No, go ahead.
I'm about to graduate college, so I have very, very little money. And I was wondering from you guys, what is the best way? I know that a lot of you guys and a lot of the bigger modders get sponsored for a lot of things, in which case a lot of companies donate their products in order so you can do a lot of really cool things. So what's the best way to try and get into it and try and get noticed?
Okay, my single best recommendation, well, you need to have a portfolio, but enter in a LAN party where CPU Magazine is at. You know, if you get first prize, you'll have your full write-up of your project. You can win $1,500, and that's how you actually can get seen in a really quick, short time period. Otherwise, you have to build a portfolio. Like I said, go to LAN parties. A lot of it is networking, talking to people face to face. Well, just do it.
Sounds good.
Don't talk, do.
Then I also suggest, I don't know what you you guys have here in Boston, but Seattle is a place called RePC, where you can get really old computers. You can get like 486s and things like that, but it's something to kind of play with. So, you know, if you go there and buy a computer for 20 bucks, you know, it might not be something you're going to game on and things like that, but it's a great opportunity for you to mod it, make it look cool, and show what you could do if you, say, had that computer company's expensive stuff.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
And come out on the forums.
Sounds good.
All right, so I think that's it. For the people that got the post-its, if you want to wander on up, and once again, thank you, panelists, for helping out and coming out here and talking about